I'm Fernando Mastrangelo, and this is The Path, an interview series that uncovers the business of being an artist. People don't like to think of art as a business. And you know what? I get it. It kind of kills the romance of it. But that's not really realistic anymore. We're trying to grow. We're asking new sets of questions. We're using social media to expand our audience and even get new clients. So we're going to uncover some of the mysteries and strategies behind some of the most successful people in the field today. I want to share those with you so you can really see what it takes to build a successful studio. On this episode of The Path, I'm sitting with John Sorensen of Coil Drift. John was fascinated by the arts at a young age. Before design, he worked extensively as a contemporary dancer and choreographer, and actually still continues to perform and show work internationally. In 2014, John created Coil Drift while having honed in on his woodworking skills while working at Makeville Studios. John is entirely self-taught, both in design and as an entrepreneur. Let's jump into the interview right now. John, thank you so much for sitting down with me. John is of Coil Drift. You've been in business now for about 3-4 years, right?
Yeah, I would say, 4 years.
You're originally from Oregon.
I am.
A creative family, or at least a family that allowed you to explore your creativity.
Both of my parents didn't professionally pursue creativity, but super
They
creative.
did not pursue creativity?
They were both lawyers, actually.
Oh, wow.
Sounds a lot more intense than it was. My dad is like a mediator for families, for kids. And my mom is an arbitrator. She works for herself. So, but my dad was like singing opera on the side, and my mother grew up playing piano and always did. So, and they were just like super encouraging
to be creative.
Yeah, like the difficulty was choosing what we wanted to do instead of getting us to do things,
right.
Running around to 7 different rehearsals every day.
Right, which that ended up becoming your first sort of passion in life was dance.
It was. So the dance was actually like the first thing that got me to kind of zero in from...
What age are we talking about, by the way?
We're talking about, it was late. I was like 13, 14. Oh. Late for a dance.
Late for dance, okay.
For dancers. For the beginning of like studying dance, everyone was like, oh, it's so late. You're like already so old.
Well, were you already athletic? Did you have
I was already athletic,
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I had done gymnastics a lot growing up. Got too tall for that. And so then when I started dancing, it was very quickly, I like let everything else drop away because it was so interesting to me, and also because it like demanded that. Like I didn't have any time to do anything else. So I was studying violin at the time, singing, and some sports, but violin was like pretty serious, and I let that go when I started dancing. And then, I think dancers,
you became like, this is a major part of your life in a lot of ways.
It was very much
identity.
A career. I danced professionally for 10 years.
Wow.
And also managed to go to school, which a lot of dancers find difficult to do because there's such a short period of time that you...
Yeah, what's the time life?
Well, so, you're pressured to start professionally dancing as early as you can when you're serious about dancing. So what I did was I graduated from high school a year early. When I was 17, moved to New York, and I went to the Tisch Conservatory at NYU, which is a 3-year program and 2 summers. So I was out 2 years before most people my age had finished their undergrad. So I graduated from when I was 20.
When you were 20.
Yeah. And then started dancing professionally, and
Right from there. And then how long were you professionally dancing? You said 10 years,
10
but
years.
So till you were 30.
Yeah. I would say, I think the transition to start my design practice was, very kind of fluid. And I think for at least a year I was dancing professionally and kind of doing design things on the side or at night.
You had said at some point that you had sort of reached your pay scale with dance, right? And you said, and then ultimately you were like, well, okay, great. Like I want to keep growing
exactly.
And so that was one of the, I'm sure that was
it was a big driver. I mean, unlike I think a lot of people who transition careers, it wasn't like a I wasn't feeling that I needed more, that I wasn't getting the inspiration from dance. Like it wasn't an artistic need. I felt great about what I was getting from dance. I did have creative ambitions outside of dance for sure, but I realized one day I was in the dressing room. I have a visceral memory of being in the dressing room at Sleep No More. I was in the cast when it had just opened, so it was the first year.
Cool.
And I realized that like we were all kind of like, the show was very hot. Everyone was talking about it. Everybody was coming, and we were kind of at the top of our game. And people in the dressing room with me were 10 years older than I was. Some of them. Wow. We were all making the same amount of money, and I was like, I don't know if there's more that I think that a successful dance career for me will see me be paid the same amount of money as I am now for the rest of my career until I go and get my master's and teach at a university. That was kind of the track.
And also probably your body was taking a toll at this point, right?
And that's all if your body can hold up.
Right.
And so for me, I was like, I want to buy a house. I want to I have aspirations.
Sure. You said you had other creative aspirations. Obviously, design was one of them. Was there others?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about this a lot in terms of why did it manifest in design? Why is that what I chose? And I think that there's a lot of factors and different routes I could have gone, sculpture. I think about I could have become a sculptor. I could have done just interior design. But it was kind of a perfect storm of interest in objects and form, and in the sense the same thing that choreographers are interested in, except that these objects don't move around.
Right.
And then interest in the sense of home and how we create home, and thinking about those concepts, why do we feel different ways when we walk into this home versus this home? What is it that makes me feel so comfortable here? And so those two things, the kind of sculptural interest in form and mixed with this idea of home, I felt like designing objects that would be that you would live with would be a good way to go.
I mean, hearing you say that now, we can kind of jump into Coil Drift, but that's a perfect thesis of what of the work, the way it's made, the way you sort of approach it. It's sculptural, but yet it feels. And I've seen some of your interiors, of course, and they have a homey feeling. They have a very
It's about material. It's about the combination of materials and how they live together, and the balance. I'm obsessed with balance, not in a symmetrical way, but in weight. I think things need to be balanced. I'm a Libra. I think this.
Oh, me too. What day?
October 19.
Oh, I'm October 13.
Oh,
yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. So I am always thinking about things being in balance in that way, and I think my objects, lighting, it all 100% needs to have that feeling.
So you make the decision to sort of transition your life.
Yeah.
What does that time period look like? And how do you make that big decision to say, I'm going to start a furniture brand or a company?
Yeah.
Because that's interesting time. You're already you're already mature. You're already, you're not your
totally.
20s anymore.
It was definitely a career change versus, I think about this when I talk to designers who maybe started a studio right out of school. Right. That's a whole different set of challenges.
Yeah, because you're already a person in the world, and you're a dancer.
And a lot of what I learned as a dancer was very much at play in helping me start the studio. I had a lot of tools in my toolbox already. But it's funny, we talked about this idea of what Coil and Drift is with the background in dance and all this. None of that was clear for at least 2 years. And I think it's important to say that when we're thinking about young people starting studios or creating it, it wasn't, I didn't walk into the first day and say this is what Coil and Drift is going to be, and now I'm going to start.
Was it called Coil and Drift by the way?
It always was.
It always was. Nice.
Yeah, the name connotates movement and
like you coil, then you sort of drift out. Yeah. I remember when I first realized that, I was like, wow, that's a brilliant name, because you don't really understand what coil and drift might mean, in terms of furniture.
Sure.
But it's become such a nice branding tool, a way that you've been able to sort of grow the brand based on that. But you're saying it wasn't fully fleshed out.
No. And I mean, the first, well, let's go back.
Yeah.
I was taking, the first iteration of like, let's explore design came through me taking a kind of apprenticeship at a woodworking studio. Oh, cool. And, it happened because there was a class that I wanted to take I took the class, it was amazing. I wanted to take it again, and no one signed up the second time. So the owner of the space was like, well, let's just do kind of an apprenticeship. Cool. So I kind of fell into that in a lucky way. And she kind of pushed me to start drawing my own work. Nice. And thinking about that. And this was all happening while I was dancing.
While you're still
during
dancing.
The day.
Got it.
So then after a year of doing that kind of apprenticeship, I learned about Brooklyn Designs, which is like a very kind of a small trade show that I think a lot of like young designers have used as like a first kind of dip your toe into showing your work.
How did you know to do that? How did you learn about it?
I have no idea.
No idea?
I'd heard about it. I think someone who I had been in contact with at this woodworking studio had shown there before.
So at this point, you don't understand the spectrum of the design world whatsoever.
Idea. So I was like, I will design a collection
cool.
and show it at this trade show once. Let's see what happens. That's when I named Coil and Drift. And there was a lot of reclaimed wood in that collection.
What was the do any of those designs remain today?
Yes.
They do.
So the two pieces that kind of stayed and were obviously popular, like the moment the show opened, it was clear, was the desk coffee table, which is still in the collection.
Of course.
And the hover shelving unit, which is actually getting a redesign this year.
Cool.
But continues to still be super, like, one of the best selling pieces for us.
How prepared were you for? So you do the fair, right?
I do the fair. I'm like,
is your branding there? Is your PDFs, your website?
In fact, the logo is exactly what it remains to be today. I think that I understood from dancing that, that's something to say is that every dancer in New York today is their own business and entrepreneur. Like everybody is freelancing. There's very few companies where you would just work for one company.
I see.
So everyone is representing themselves. So I had an understanding, I think, of branding that was because of that. Yeah. So the branding was there. Like I had postcards.
Yeah, you had.
They were definitely not on the level of what I would want to do now, but I look back and I was like, oh,
not a bad start.
I had like a decal on the wall. Yeah. I can't believe I figured that out at that point.
And you're by yourself at this point, right? Really, you're hustling.
It was just me. Yeah,
you're building this stuff yourself.
Asked friends to help me bring all the furniture
over, right?
I built it all myself. I found a friend who was a metal fabricator who built the base for me of the coffee table, and I sold like half of the.
How did you know how to price
models.
Your stuff, by the way? Right.
It was terribly priced.
It was terribly priced.
It was way too cheap. And that's probably why I sold half of the collection at the
so
show.
You were just playing it by gut. You were like, well, this is kind of what I think it should be worth.
Exactly.
Not knowing where you would end up in the market eventually.
No idea. And also probably looking at Etsy for pricing help. I had no idea where to go for this stuff. And I also had never been to another trade show and seen who else was making work in New York. Unbeknownst to me, this was in a moment when there were a lot of people doing what I was doing, or maybe had done this for maybe 4 years now, and were really starting to, I think of myself I think of Coil and Drift in the timeline of Fort Standard had been 4 years before me, and was. I idolized them when I first started to understand that there were other people around. So I was like a few years behind them. But there was definitely like a thing happening in New York, which I think continues to happen now.
I think it's growing now, in fact.
Yeah.
So then you were, okay, you sold things, so you felt encouraged.
Sold things, felt encouraged. I got a job building like a whole bunch of desks for a like biotech incubator in Harlem.
Awesome.
From that. And then I rented a studio. So that was like
that's the moment
got me into actually having a space of my own. Still was doing other dance work.
Got it. So in the meantime, you're still having that second job.
And
primary
actually,
job.
I'm remembering now, during that time period of I had this new studio, I took a job managing a company that imported Dutch bicycles to the US. Because it was through a friend of a friend, and it was an opportunity for me in my mind to learn how actual companies operate and to learn how to run a company. The owners were in New York, but also traveling often in the Netherlands. And so they a lot of the time I was running the company, and it turned out being very useful.
So you learned about like
just
invoicing, taxes, this, that.
Things that I had no idea. I mean, even after that, looking back, I still had no idea how to run a company. I mean, no idea. But yeah, I would say that at least the first 2 years of Coil Drift was just absorbing and learning every single day and constantly not knowing what I was doing. I mean, I still feel like I'm doing that.
Did you have to support it at all ever through your other work?
Absolutely.
You did?
I mean, I lived off of dance and this other job for at least the first 2 years of doing Coil Drift. It wasn't until, a few years in that I just made the leap, and it was, I remember having a conversation with a friend who lives in Paris. This friend, she's a musician, and he was just like, at some point you're gonna have to just do this, or it's not gonna happen. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I just jumped into it, and,
Is that when you got the Emerging Designer Award?
So that was the next year.
That was the next year.
Yeah. So,
because for me, like, that's when I found your work. Was that moment? I feel like that was also sort of pivotal for you, because you sort of took it up a notch.
It was. It's funny. I think.
And I'm curious though how you got to that decision to then go to that level, that fair, and really put yourself out there. You do the.
Okay, so somehow I learned about the AD show. I did the AD show. Somehow I learned about ICFF. The next year I did ICFF.
How did you?
I could only afford to do one show a year.
Okay.
So I did one a year, and ICFF was the third year. So how did I afford? I did the smallest booth at ICFF that you could possibly do, and it was in the back. Yeah. I don't know how.
In the maid section.
In the maid section,
of course.
No, ICFF doesn't have a maid section. That's the AD show.
Oh, the AD show. I'm sorry. Yes.
ICFF was in the back of like the massive Javits Center.
Yeah.
I had to like tell my friends how to find me. And I don't know how they found me for an award, but they made their way all the way back there and did. And that was huge for me because somehow I had this tiny booth. It also had to do with spatial design because I figured out how to fit almost the whole collection in this space without it feeling overwhelming. And then because it was such a small space, it wasn't the biggest amount of money ever. It was
it was worth it.
$4,000.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was worth it.
Well,
yeah.
All right. So you get the award. You're feeling good. Did you sell from that show?
I did.
Awesome.
Yeah. I started working with a few showrooms after that show, which I always think is, it's a nice thing. It's not been like a major driving force for Coil Drift because I don't know that
the margins are just not there.
Yeah, it doesn't really work that way, I think, anymore. But
it's interesting. Nice. I don't want to just jump over that because I think it's a really interesting point. You do have the option right at the beginning, right? People are going to say, "Oh, let me show your work." Blah, blah. Then that's a whole nother spectrum of things that you have to start to consider.
Yeah.
Now, the ones that you did choose to work, did you choose to work with a few?
Yeah, maybe 3, I think. Yeah.
Was that for exposure mainly?
Yeah.
Not for.
So,
what was your thinking there?
well, this is, we can go into, I should bring up this like listening tour thing that I did. So where I would say that it was probably as I was leading up to ICFF and also a little bit after it. I think probably mostly after ICFF happened and that award happened, I found 10 studios in the city that I really loved and had followed for, the last few years and didn't know any of them and just reached out to them and said, can I come and talk to you about how you do what you do?
That was
it was you, it was Egg Collective, it was Apparatus. It was like, I think Rich Brilliant Willing I did it with, actually, now that I think about Calico, I went and chatted with them.
That's awesome.
People that were not doing furniture even.
And some of them became like, I
bought
Apparatus, bought like the people
Totally.
You started coming to
became
actually.
clients, yeah.
And
absolutely.
fans, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so so during that time when I was talking to people, someone told me, and I can't remember even who it was, but they said, showrooms are not going to be helpful for you for money. Like it's not going to be, it is essentially a calling card. I think multiple people said that. But they were like, they're great in terms of relationships. They're great in terms of client building and just awareness. And at that point, I think one of the showrooms I was talking to was in LA. And I was like, I have never shown my work in LA. So it'd be super nice to be able to have all of it out there.
Some exposure, right, for the brand.
And I also had no showroom, no space. Like the space that we have now where we can have some of the work is new. So for a long time, trade shows were the only, and showrooms were the only opportunity for people to see the work in person. Mm-hmm. So I felt that was important, even if it wasn't super financially viable. And I still kind of feel that way. Like I work with 4 showrooms now.
In the United States?
In the US.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Do they have a limited amount of your items,
mm-hmm.
or do they have,
none of them have the full collection.
Okay.
They each have their own kind of, and all of them have different work, which is nice.
Are any in New York?
Mm-hmm. Fair.
Okay.
Yeah. And Fair is a great example. Like they have my daybed, which none of the other showrooms have, some lighting, and it's great. They do sell the work, but
Was
it's
that
not a major driver. Right. But the relationship I have with Brad, I think it's wonderful. It's super valuable. I've met people because of him. I've met other designers because of him. There's still something interesting about a showroom in the sense that it brings people together in a way that I can't do now because I can't have my own showroom yet because I don't have the funds. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. Sometimes I wonder, we've closed off some of that mainly for market reasons, right? Mm-hmm. If we're in New York and people can come to us direct, It gets a little bit a conflict of interest when you can say, and then they start to think, does Fair or does so-and-so represent?
Right.
And then you have to explain that about your brand. So, I think it's been a good move. Also, I think part of the reason you've been able to do it is because of the storytelling and the mm-hmm. brand building you've done
for sure
as an independent, you know what I mean? And now if we start stepping back, you had success with the fair or those early fairs, you got your name out there, you got this award, you started to slowly build up your roster of things that you were selling.
Right.
Then now there's this, you've started to enter into this like identity for Coil and Drift.
And that was really last season.
I feel like this year you've been,
we went crazy a little bit.
You went from and how have you managed from that sort of middle area now? I feel like you've taken the next step. You know?
We definitely have had some, there have been some bumps in the road for sure in terms of production and, it's...
how are you managing that?
So currently we work with, I think like 7 different fabricators making different components for the work.
So you've stepped back from making.
I've fully stepped back from making, absolutely.
And that's for, can you explain maybe why?
Yeah, it's because my real passion was never for actually making, especially in terms of making production runs. I really enjoy using my hands and doing prototyping, but being a fabricator is very different than that. I think a lot of designers, that's a hard lesson to learn. Making the same piece over and over again is not the same as prototyping work and getting to be creative. So I've stepped back from that. Also, I have the company has to be run by someone.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So at a certain point, it's like there's just too much. There's not enough hours in the day. So that's when I really started focusing on working with fabricators, and that was set up really well. And then the orders started really coming in, and that's a whole new ball game when you
kind of scale it.
Yeah, because I think the reality is that some fabricators are, we're working with, I think, what is called private label or black label fabricators who are, they're not putting their name on the work at all. They're making it for a designer. And they, in their ideal world, you'd be ordering, 50 of a piece.
Sure.
And that's kind of their goal. And I think for a lot of our fabricators, the transition has been like, it's one thing for them to develop the work with us and make a few pieces every now and then. When we start to order and, ask for them to produce more and more of the work, but we're not at the 50 pieces in order yet, we start to be in this middle ground. And that's what the last spring we started to feel ourselves in, where we're not their top client, but
you want the attention of a top client.
We also are demanding more of them than we were at the beginning. It's all about relationship building. And
so how did you do that? You went to Pennsylvania. Obviously, you've been working with the guy that builds these for you.
Yeah, we have a family of Mennonites that build.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, they're literally a family. They're wonderful. It's been in a lot
but 7 different fabricators?
That includes woodworking, metalworking, lamp fabricators, because we have a lamp fabricator that does almost everything, and also UL lists the light.
Got it.
Which is important for us. And then machinists. We have someone who casts the cast resin for the resin chandelier. That's a whole different person.
Yeah, that's how you have to end up running the company mainly, right? You got to step away from that to start managing. Well, also to make your vision happen or to bring new pieces to market or something, you have to end up.
Totally. And I think what I say a lot now and what I think a lot now is because of the size that we're at, which is that we're still very small, but growing, we are constantly reevaluating what is best for Coil and Drift right now. And it's constantly changing. So I think every time I think, okay, we got this model, this works well, every season we have to reevaluate it because something is shifting. Maybe a fabricator, when you're working with fabricators, it's a two-way street. It's not just that you have to feel good about it, but they also have to feel good about it. And if they're not feeling good about it, then you also have to have that conversation. So that kind of those growing pains have been happening a lot. But it's mainly because we decided to really focus on telling the story of Coil and Drift, which is essentially how does a background in choreography and dance, which is actually influence and drive the design of objects.
The reason I really want to touch on this, not only because this year you exploded out with a lot of this type of thing, what it means, how you're seeing this as brand building, how you're using this to sort of leverage the brand.
So
let's talk about how many fairs you did first of all.
Okay, yeah.
You went from doing one fair a year. You said one fair I could afford from 4,000.
Yeah.
Then year after year, you've been doing more and more. This year you did 4.
We did 4, but 4 including a fully self-produced gallery show. So it was,
and the video and new stuff.
It was crazy. So the original plan for last spring was to create this film that we made with Charlie Shuck, who also shot the collection in the same set that we designed and built.
He's great, by the way.
He's fantastic. And he's genius. And so making that film, and then the idea was to launch the collection at Collective with this film showing and have live dancers who were involved in the film at the show. So that all happened. and it was fantastic and amazing. And it just kept, like, it created a snowball. And
especially in the press too.
Yeah. And because Collective was so early, we had this time to then do other shows, which we hadn't planned on doing. So then we did the 80s show.
So riding the momentum of that, you were like, let me double down.
Yeah. Well, also the reality is too that like we had the collection fabricated.
Right.
So there's something to say for that. Like I think each show we like changed around a few pieces, and then redesigned the environment for each show. But we had the work. So that's, again, we're that small. So it was
you hit 3 very different markets when you do those shows. When you do Collective, it's a certain audience.
Totally. I feel like I'm the expert of the year of like, how are these shows different? Because I did them all in a line.
Let's talk about it, because I think it's important. You know, we only do Collective for very particular reasons, but
they're very different, and I think they're each also different every year and changing a lot. But I think last year Collective had moved to a different space, was smaller and was earlier, so they were aligned with the Armory Week.
Right.
So it was very much art focused, and we went into it also having spoken to you and Gabriel at Apparatus, knowing that it was going to be a more art focused audience. So for sure, I understood going in that having a live performance, like immersive performance element to the space would be something that the Collective crowd could handle, that I would not feel comfortable showing at ICFF or
it would be
the show.
Kind of
it would be strange. And it would feel like, when they have like people walking around with trays, like giving out free food, like that is what I equate to the like performances of that. But at Collective, people are showing work that is a bit more risque or
just more experimental, just like, exactly.
And what I love is that the Collective concept section, which I was technically a part of, Stephen's original idea for it is that you take, he asks the designers to go back to an original thought, an original like essence of their practice, and then make something new for the show, which I know you totally did. And that was what I was attempting to do, was to like bring dance into the process. And so along the way, we did that, and now have decided that every launch for Coil Drift will involve a performative aspect.
And it was because of the response that you got from that?
Absolutely. That, and then doing the self-produced show. So then we did the AD show and ICFF, and those were much more like, we understand how to do this. We've done this before. We're standing and presenting the work.
Sure.
I think I remember something that Laura said in an earlier episode about just physically being at like ICFF or the AD show and like selling the work and talking to people. It's super useful. Like you learn so much about who your client base is, and what people think. I mean, people think that they're like hiding how they feel about pieces, but they're not. Like you walk away really knowing what
the psychology of your buyer.
Yeah, exactly. So those were interesting because of that. In the 80s show, I would say like the general gist is that the 80s show is a more local interior designer base, like Long Island, Jersey, the kind of surrounding tri-state area. ICFF people fly from the whole country, and some from Europe.
Were you able to manage where your price points are, right? You can hit those 3 different markets, right?
Yeah.
That was part of.
I mean, I'd say we're on the low end side for Collective, and we're on the high end, super high end for AD, and high end for.
Is that where you're comfortable now? You feel like that's the market you want to stay? Like,
yeah, I'm comfortable with my pricing. So we did a big price readjust after that, kind of going around and talking to designers. Basically every single designer was like, "You're way too cheap."
Right.
For the quality of work and also for like the kind of work that you're making.
It's so important for people to understand this, that you have to be able to step back from your own work and say, right, the quality and the sort of the design that we're putting into this is of a certain value.
Absolutely. And for me, it was very difficult. I mean, going through the like learning process that I was going through from being like essentially just a civilian to being a designer and understanding this world, it was so drastic that I didn't understand. I remember the realization that I didn't know any of my clients. The people that I was actually designing for were not my friends, because we don't make an amount of money. The fact that my friends would kind of laugh at the price point of the furniture where it ended up being, it was a big like, oh, okay, yeah, this is not my customer base. I think like at the Brooklyn Designs show, the Dusk coffee table was like the size for like my Brooklyn apartment. and then, everyone who wanted to buy it was asking for custom sizes that were, twice the size.
Right.
So my customer was not people that I knew. And so then learning who they were, getting to know them, and being okay with that was a huge, huge learning curve that also I think went in tandem with learning about pricing. Like, who is it that you're selling this work to?
Yeah, it's
and
crucial.
Actually that concept is coming around again full circle for me, because I'm working on an accessory collection that I'll sell on the website directly, and nothing is available on the website for purchase currently. You have to reach out to us. So it'll kind of open up a new...
We're doing the same.
...direct thing.
Yeah, trying to see how that market will do.
In an attempt to get to know who it is that's actually owning this work. Because, even like the people that are... Because we work so much with interior designers and architects, the people who are actually living with the work, I don't often get to meet them.
Right.
And the hope is that maybe they will come back to the website 2 years after getting their dining table and be like, oh, it's Christmas, I'm going to get this beautiful vase. Cool. And then we have a relationship then and a connection. And then they still get to keep their connection with their designer. It's not like we're stepping in, because designers are super useful still. So,
have you had to take on investment for Coil Drift, or has this all been self-funded still?
This has been fully self-funded.
I mean, through the company.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Yeah, Coil Drift is me still. It is me. I have.
Do you want investors and stuff? I mean, do you need that type of thing? What are the next? What are the steps you're sort of?
I think about that a lot. It's for sure that I don't want to continue doing what I'm doing in the same way that I'm doing it forever. So something needs to change, because I don't want to do it alone. So what that looks like is I'd like to find someone who is either like a co-founder, a partner, or someone who I hire as an employee who then grows with the company and eventually becomes steps into a role
like the CEO or something.
And it could be actually like someone who is maybe, regardless, it will be someone who has more of a background in like business development.
The reason I was asking is because this company, of all the people that I know, this one feels like it has that potential, not only to scale, but which is, not everyone has the potential to scale.
Yeah.
And so I feel like you're at that place where the right kind of partnership could really escalate.
And it's terrifying because it's such a like an important decision, and it can't just happen. It has to be slow and organic, and it has to be the right.
You said you're a little bit nervous. Like, what is it because giving up a portion of the company? Is it
but it's also just like so much about Coil and Drift is relationships with other people, and I can imagine, of course, that would be the most important relationship. To have someone who is, taking over, because I do everything right now, and I have an employee and an intern who do a lot for sure, but because I do the fair share of the work, anyone who's coming in is going to be me giving up a portion of that work so that they can then take on and do and run with it and expand it in a way that I can't.
Because right now you're literally doing all the behind this everything.
Yeah, I'm hiring someone right now who will hopefully be more of an office manager, studio manager.
Cool.
And then
who will then liaison perhaps with your fabricators?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you want to see your role as? Like, What's your, in a year, 2 years, what do you want your role to feel like?
So I would like to be a designer.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's what
not
everyone
just like
says.
a fireman where you're just putting out fires all the time. Yeah.
I think everyone says that, and it's
true.
I have to admit that I do love running a company, and I think that's important to say. Like, I don't think everyone does. So I really enjoy doing that. Yeah. So I will continue to run the company. That's inevitable. But I have dreams of being able to see a design process through in a way that I don't have the ability to do now. I mean, there is a certain extent of like decisions that get made about new work where, it has to be about like, what can we feasibly make that's going to be strong in a design sense, strong in a structural fabrication sense, and that we can do by the opening of the collection at this date. So one of the things that will happen that kind of will go in tandem with this kind of secret search for someone will be a kind of pulling back from trade shows and that thing this year, which is, not shocking considering that we did the 3 trade shows and then a self-produced show, which focused on this film and then kind of taking some of the design work, these chairs, and changing them to be more art focused.
Are you nervous about not doing the fairs? In terms of sales? Yeah.
Totally.
We're no longer doing fairs.
Okay.
Like as a rule.
I mean, so I haven't made that decision in terms of it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think I've made, of course it can always change.
Of course.
But I think I've made the decision to not do a show this year, except for one self-produced show that will be more in line with launching the collection than the show we did last year, which was super art focused.
So you are launching another collection in 19.
But we will launch a new collection. It's going to be all lighting.
Oh, great.
And it's the accessories collection won't launch in May. It will probably launch next fall. I think it's too much to do them both at the same time. Because accessories is basically like we're launching a new company. Yeah. I mean, it's like a full different idea. With the same aesthetic, it's obviously the same design world, but it's in terms of structurally, it'll be e-commerce, it'll be, direct, it's a whole new realm of like shipping and all of this. The lighting collection is essentially based on, the concept around it is that I have recently purchased an apartment May, in the middle of all of the shows, I was closing on an apartment.
Congrats.
And thank you. And so I've given myself the task of creating new lighting for the space.
Meanwhile, doing a collection.
And that lighting will become a collection, but it is for the first time based on literally how I want to live. Instead of designing, we talked about getting to know my client and kind of designing for someone else. And I've been doing that for a while. And so this is the first time I'm trying to actually design for something that I will live with. I live with a lot of my furniture, but I rotate it a lot. Lighting, especially like ceiling lighting, you don't rotate it necessarily as much because you install it. So designing something that I will be comfortable living with for a long time. And so it will be a pendant, a chandelier, and
But you're not going to do it at the fair. You're going to rent your own space. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at it like, well, we spent X amount last year on trade fairs. Like, I can do this on my own. Yeah. You've built enough social media presence. You probably have a good email list at this point.
Yeah, and I'm also looking to the future of trying to, through the accessories, but also just in general, trying to develop more of a relationship with people who are buying the work. And
them personally, and your story and your narrative.
And I think that I have a good relationship with the design, the trade.
Yes, for sure.
Of course, that can grow, like it should grow, and I love the trade, and we'll continue to grow that relationship. But I'd say we do the best at our relationship with the trade and we don't really know who the actual people are.
The private clients.
So, right. So I would say if we have like a storefront in Soho for a week, we're much more likely to have people walking in off the street or people who have heard of us and maybe follow us on Instagram walk down to that than they are to go into the Javits Center because they don't know and it's intimidating.
Good approach. I think that's smart.
So that's part of
and then
what
you
we're
loop them
about.
in by the performance aspect of it. Yeah, right. And they stay intrigued. And they're like, wow, this is furniture and lighting.
And for people who haven't seen the performance work, first of all, you can see the film on our website. But it's not like we set up a stage and dancers are like doing a performance, of a kind of traditional choreography. It's like an immersive experience where you may not necessarily understand when you walk in that is a dancer, that they're sitting on a chair in the space. There's no barrier between the audience and the performers. And it's because they like slowly start to melt onto the table that you realize that there might be something else happening. So it's
so you can walk in. You'll walk into a quiet. You'll walk into a quiet space, and all of a sudden, somebody sitting at the table will start to melt.
Absolutely. And in an ideal world, it's just you, and you have like a private experience with this performer.
Why are you so intrigued in doing that to take?
I think because it's my way, and I think it works. So far it's worked really well of showing the world. I think as designers, our job or our task is to show the world how to interact with the work that we're making, like options of ways that we can interact. That's why we create interiors, whether it's for a trade show or for a photo shoot, that are in a certain realm. Like it's an opportunity to show how people might interact with this work. I think these
because you're selling an aesthetic, you are in particular.
Thing. Yeah, it's the same as a photo shoot. We're giving you an idea of how you might interact with this work, and also asking people to question how they interact with work and how important furniture is in their lives. I think especially in our age of IKEA and like consumerism and online, we don't value objects as much, or we don't take a lot of time to like stop and think about how it affects us. And I can tell you, as someone who just moved and like renovated a home for the first time, it's vast the way that this new design space influences the way that I live on a daily basis versus the way that it was before we renovated. I mean, it's such night and day. The shape of a chair that you sit in every day, totally going to affect the way you live. And not just the way we're talking about like your happiness. Like if you can walk in the door every day and like have a sense of relief, or just have your weight
now think
down.
about I have this chair, just telling everyone, but I feel that way in this chair because it feels like home. I feel like I'm at home right now. You know what I mean?
Literally.
Yeah, and it's grown on me that way.
So great.
So that's cool.
That's what it's all about, right? Like trying to help people understand how to live with this work, and that it might, I'm not saying it's going to change your life, but it might
improve.
Yeah.
So this is it. So this is the next big move for you. Next year, slow down the fairs, do another show.
Also, this space that we're in it's very small, but it's our new studio, and
it's your showroom.
And it's the first time we've had work that you can actually come and see.
That's awesome.
And that is useful because it's so painful, and any young designer has had this feeling when a potential client reaches out to you and says, I am this close from buying your day bed, and I just have to sit in it. And you're like, I don't have one. I'm sorry. No. Saying no to a client like that, it just sucks, So I have found that it's not going to be like, no one's going to walk in off the street. We're in Sunset Park. But people will come out here. And that's super useful.
No, there becomes a moment where it becomes crucial. Yeah. And the ROI that you get on just having this, so that somebody can see this and say, okay, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
Perhaps we'll pay the rent for the next couple months. You know what I mean?
And also, it's funny. I have seen this happen with other designers who have gotten showrooms. There's a new element to this, which I'm sure you guys see at your studio that I never thought about before, which is that so much of our business is about visual content for social media these days. I mean, it took me a long time to admit that Instagram actually drove sales. And now I'm like, it absolutely drives sales. There is no question.
Yeah.
And so much of that is creating new images. So this space, I can then create images every day. I can do whatever I want to make a new image. We can also have photo shoots in the space, with backdrops and everything.
I remember you talking about this when we first met. Yeah. So this is great.
But I didn't think about the fact that it's not necessarily just people coming to see the work in the space. It's about the fact that we can photograph it.
Yeah, huge.
And every day is an opportunity to have new content for the internet. So that's...
Dude, you're doing it.
Yeah,
you're doing. It's been amazing to watch the last few years as you've grown. From that deer in the headlights first time we met to how you are now, understanding your clients, building your brand, finally getting here. I mean, it's just been.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it has been a wild ride. It's always about asking questions. I mean, I keep going back to this. The fact that the thing that dance gave to me more than anything else for design is the ability to take criticism and ask people how to do things and learn quickly. Because in dance, you have 30 minutes to learn something, and it's either you learn it and you get the job or you don't.
Wow.
So we're constantly learning new things, and we're not afraid to ask questions. And I think if designers, I mean, I think about someday doing workshops at RISD or design schools of to kind of get these new designers, it's okay to say I have no idea what I'm doing. Help me.
Yes.
How do I do this? People will answer. It's very rare.
That's why we're doing this show.
No, I'm not going to talk to you about that. Really? It's my intellectual property. I'm sorry. That's
maybe
happened to me once.
Really? That's never happened to me.
Everyone is oh yeah, you want to know how to. I was just talking to somebody about sand casting because I want to sand cast something, and they're like, oh yeah, let's talk about it. It's a very ancient. It's not like you're stealing someone's technique.
Absolutely right.
So
dude, I love it.
That's the big thing.
You've been. I feel like that spirit's been there since day one. I think it will continue, and then eventually you'll be giving off all the advice that you've learned, just like you did here, man. Thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about all this stuff.
It's super fun.
I've loved watching your company grow. You grow as a designer. Now I was looking at your roster of things that you have. It's getting expensive.
It's filling out.
Yeah, it's filling out nicely. But it has such a beautiful continuity, in your language, and this the sort of the way that you design based on the way the body is, this, from dance, the way that the body might move in dance. I think it's really beautiful.
That's the idea, physicalizing these forms.
It's working.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.
That's
Thank you
awesome.
again. All right.